consultation is not a tick box exercise. We ensure that gender diversity, for instance, within the ownership, within management, within other structures is there, it's present. How do we ensure that as we implement these things, that we don't just pay lip service to them, but we actually put the necessary indicators and measures to ensure that the necessary changes we're wanting to see are actually being done? In our view, if that is not happening, then we kind of leave it to market forces to determine this level, the growth and the transition more broadly. But then it puts us at a greater risk of then recreating all of these injustices that we know all too well in South African society.
And I want you to tell us a little bit more about the work that you do. So the president again saying that the potential to produce up to 30 million tons of green hydrogen and derivatives a year by 2050 is what this project represents. But this will also surely require a lot of funding. We're being told that it's a partnership, but can we afford some of the concessionary loans and risks that we're taking on, given our energy supply problems that are also impacting on growth? How are you holding government to account to move beyond the jargon, the operative words that are being thrown around, and drill down to communities and say, yes, these are the inconveniences, there is criticism, but we shouldn't just criticize beyond or just for the sake of it?
100%. And I think this is, I can't restate that last point that you've made about the criticism with constructive points as well. And sometimes I think that's oftentimes the most difficult part to come up with. And I think this is the role that we play, specifically as SACAN, but also as some of the NGOs working on this space, is that how do we move and engage with the state through its various mandated structures? So through your public participation formats, through your written formats, through spoken formats, through bilaterals, all of which with the intention of holding them to account for the statements that they've said. If then, obviously, these things aren't followed through in a manner that I think we find satisfactory, then we do two things. We either make noise about it, or then we also provide alternative options that obviously the one could look at taking or not taking, in terms of how to conduct engagement, for instance, and ways in which to conduct society, engage society more broadly. So for us, this is how we do it, and we then use tools like media, for instance, in interviews such as these, to be able to educate people on what is it that they should do when holding government to account on the commitments that they make. Because, of course, some of these things are done of our backs as taxpayers, but some of them are intended to benefit us as a society. So if we aren't going to be in the driver's seat, at least, of the decision, or at least be as close as possible to those spaces where these conversations are happening, then we would lessen the likelihood that we'll be able to hold decision makers to account. Whereas if at least we could move closer to where the conversations are happening, then, and this is our view, that you are then able to put quite a bit of pressure, particularly from a numbers perspective, on decision makers to then make the right decision necessary for the best future for South Africa, not only economically, but environmentally and socially as well.
How difficult has that been, or easy, that consultative process? And I'm talking about meaningful representativity and consultation. South Africa's existing renewable generators are currently insufficient, even though they're meant to cover electricity supply gaps left by Eskom's failing coal feed. Some of these green energy projects we've seen have been met with a protest because communities are saying, not only have you not consulted us, but some of the exploratory work that you're doing is already damaging the environment and our livelihood.
Yeah. So some of those comments we're very much in agreement with, particularly how some of the consultation takes place in the more hotspot areas. And we're of the view in such instances that, firstly, we understand that there's no such thing as enough consultation that one can do, which again comes up against things like timelines and other commitments, at least from the company side, to try and meet targets. For us, it's always a kind of a thing where I think the role that civil society plays is to try and engage with society on a regular basis, such that when these moments come where then one can have to engage with decision makers, you're basically already prepared, as opposed to first having to get prepared to engage on these issues. Now, how well it's worked in the past, it's a give and take, right? Because just because you've got the opportunity to raise your voice and speak out on something doesn't necessarily mean that your issue is going to get taken up.
Right.
Right?
Thando,
So, Yeah.
We have run
No,
out of
understood.
time, but thank you. Thando Lukuko is a climate change activist. So government has, of course, says that some of these SIPS projects have been identified theoretically for expedited development, and that means a prescribed shortened time frame for these approvals and authorizations.